Well, the Attorney General Arthel in Paris expressing concern that America, of course, is at risk for facing small-scale attacks similar to the ones in Paris last week. And you know, we've seen this before in our country. So how can U.S. anti-terrorism experts prevent similar attacks here at home before they happen? Is that possible? Jonathan Schanzer is the Vice President of Research at the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies, also the author of the recently published book, State of Failure, Yasser Arafat, Mohammed Abbas, and the Unmaking of the Palestinian State. Jonathan, good to see you. We just heard Peter Doocy say the potential for attacks every single week. It doesn't take much.
No, it doesn't take much, and actually, as a former terrorism finance analyst, I was just taking a look at what it might have even cost to carry out these kinds of attacks that we saw this week, and the answer is that it comes into the low thousands. You know, to essentially pay for gasoline to put in your car, to possibly rent a car, to buy one weapon and some ammunition does not cost a lot, and so it's extremely difficult to track in terms of finances, and then, of course, if these people have been off the grid for a long time, it's even harder to track them, and even more so if they're not using email, not using cell phones. If they don't have a significant electronic footprint, it almost becomes impossible for intelligence to track them.
And you raised a really interesting point, because the Karachi brothers apparently had been under surveillance for a long time. U.S. intelligence knew about them going to Yemen, alerted the French. The French knew about them. One of the brothers spent time in prison, so they were on the radar. And then they apparently kind of just dropped out because the French surveillance, we're told, ended this summer because they weren't, you know, apparently deemed threats. I mean, they were laying low. Is that your view, that they were just laying low, waiting for the moment to strike, and when the surveillance was lifted, that's when they decided to act?
Well, this is a tactic that I've become very concerned about recently. We've seen a number of individuals who've become delisted here in the United States after being put on our terrorism list because there's nothing new to suggest that they could be a problem. It doesn't mean that they've forsaken the ideology that they once embraced. It doesn't mean that they're no longer jihadists. It just means that they haven't been doing a whole lot, and so then authorities start to reshuffle priorities. They start to look at other individuals who may appear to pose a greater threat, and that allows us to take our eyes off the ball of people like these two brothers.
And what's so astounding is the attacks that we have had in this country and others have been by known people. Meyer Kahana, who I've been reporting today, was shot on November 5th, 1990, basically the first organized radical Islamic terrorist attack against our country here in the U.S. The guy was an air conditioning salesman, El Sayed Nosair, who was convicted of that. I mean, air conditioning repairman in the criminal court building. The lawyers, the judges, they all knew about him. You've got, you know, incident after incident, the Brussels synagogue shooting, the Canadian gunman in the parliament, the cafe in Australia. If it's one guy, whether law enforcement knows about him or not, how is it possible to stop this?
Well, it's a lot more difficult when you can't point to a broader conspiracy, when you don't see a significant amount of traffic going back and forth with emails and phone calls. If it's one person who decides to do this in a lone wolf style attack, or even a pair of people, as we just saw, who again are probably not likely to use email or phone in discussing their plans, you know, it's not as if we can monitor a conspiracy that goes on in someone's head or in a living room. And so it's become exceedingly difficult. This is a new trend. I think, thankfully, we haven't seen it here in the United States yet, but I think it's correct to say that it is entirely possible here. I just don't know exactly how much more we can do other than to fight the overall ideology and to make sure that we know what we're looking for as we try to mitigate these threats.
Yeah, and sadly, we have seen some of these in the past with the hatchet attack and the shooting at the Los Angeles airport by these Islamic lone wolves. Sadly, it's on the radar, but at least the world now has it front and center. Jonathan Schanzer, thank you so much.